In 1943, beneath the icy waves of the Atlantic, one American submarine answered a distress call. But what they pulled from the ocean wasn't just survivors. It was the beginning of a nightmare no one saw coming. The story begins in the year 1943, deep within the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, aboard a submarine commanded by Captain Bryce. Like every other day, he was out on a routine patrol with his crew when suddenly, through a fax transmission, Bryce received a message about an attack that had taken place on a nearby British ship. According to the report, there were a few survivors, and Bryce's mission was to rescue them and bring them aboard his submarine. Being an American, Bryce didn't feel particularly pleased about helping the British. But as a disciplined officer, he had no choice but to follow the orders coming from his headquarters. He then instructed his crewmate Odell to steer the submarine toward the given coordinates, a journey that took them nearly half a day. After navigating through the cold waters, the crew finally succeeded in rescuing the survivors. But just as relief began to settle in, one of Bryce's men alerted him about a German ship spotted in their direction. Bryce confirmed it through his instruments and immediately ordered the crew to bring the survivors inside as quickly as possible. The team worked swiftly, pulling everyone aboard, while Bryce and Odell began preparing to dive underwater. With the help of the crew, all systems were activated, and soon the submarine descended beneath the surface. Yet Bryce couldn't shake off his curiosity. He wanted to know more about the enemy ship, to anticipate any potential danger. Odell, however, told him not to worry, assuring him that they would find a way to get out of this alive, just like always. Meanwhile, when the rest of the crew and the soldiers on board discovered that one of the survivors was a woman, excitement spread throughout the submarine. After all, they hadn't seen a woman for a very long time, nor had they docked at any port recently. So naturally, curiosity and desire stirred among the men, each secretly wishing to get close to her. At the same time, Odell was tending to another survivor named Kingsley, dressing his wounds. Kingsley recalled that right before the explosion, he had been gazing at the moon, when suddenly, their ship was attacked by the enemy. The blast had killed most of his companions, and only 3 people, including Claire and another man, had managed to survive. Hearing this, Odell pulled out his ship identification diary and began showing Kingsley photos of various ships, hoping he might recognize the one that attacked them. But Kingsley couldn't remember anything clearly. Just then, Claire joined the conversation. Talking to her, Bryce learned that there had been around 70 people aboard their ship, and the number of casualties was indeed horrifically high. The third survivor, who was gravely injured, had actually been Claire's patient since she had worked as a nurse on that vessel. Although Claire desperately wanted to return to Britain, Bryce explained that the nearest British port was about 300 miles away, and they couldn't possibly make such a long journey just to drop her and her companions off. That meant Claire would have to stay aboard the submarine for a few days, whether she liked it or not. And unwillingly, she agreed. A little later, as Odell was heading back to his quarters after speaking with Bryce, he saw Claire caring for the third survivor, urging him to stay calm while she tried to stabilize his condition. Meanwhile, Bryce was suddenly informed by one of his men that there was another ship right above them. Alarmed, Bryce immediately gestured for everyone to remain absolutely silent. He then ordered the lights and engines to be shut down completely. Any sound could give away their position, and if the ship above detected them, they'd all be in grave danger. The enemy ship slowly passed over them, but just when it seemed like they might remain undetected, a record player somewhere in the submarine accidentally turned on. Odell quickly rushed to switch it off, but it was too late. The faint sound had already alerted the ship above. Moments later, a series of underwater depth charges, bombs, began dropping around them. The explosions rocked the submarine violently, throwing men off balance and injuring several crew members. Fortunately, no one was killed, and with great effort, Bryce managed to navigate the submarine to a safer location. However, in the chaos, one bomb drum had become lodged in the rear section of the submarine, and no one yet realized it was there. At that moment, everyone was still trying to understand who had accidentally turned on the record player, despite Bryce's strict orders for silence. The conversation about who might have turned on the record player was still going on when suddenly, a call came through from one of the crewmen urgently asking Bryce to come over. When Bryce arrived, the man showed him a piece of fabric. It belonged to the third survivor. What caught Bryce's attention was the German brand label on it. That's when the truth struck him. The injured man they'd rescued wasn't British at all. He was German. And if he was German, that meant there was a real possibility he could be a spy. Fuming with anger, Bryce stormed into the room where Claire was in the middle of changing the man's bandages. Seeing the handcuffs in Bryce's hand, she immediately realized that he had discovered the truth. She tried to calm him down, pleading that he was misunderstanding everything. Yes, he's German, she said desperately, but he's not a spy. He's innocent. But Bryce refused to listen. Without another word, he had Claire escorted out of the room by one of his men, and moments later, he shot the man dead. Bryce's anger didn't stop there. He was furious with Claire as well, for not telling him earlier about the survivor's real nationality. Claire, heartbroken at losing her patient, burst into tears, but no one paid her any attention. One by one, the men left for their bunks, and the submarine once again fell into an uneasy silence. That night, when Bryce tried to sleep, he suddenly heard it again, the same record player playing faintly in the darkness. No one could explain who had turned it on this time. Enraged, Bryce smashed the record player to pieces. A few hours later, as Claire lay trying to sleep, she began hearing whispering voices. Someone, or something, was whispering urgently, telling her to leave before it's too late. Confused and frightened, she looked around the dim cabin. Then, as her eyes drifted downward, she screamed. Right under her bed lay the corpse of the third survivor. Her screams brought everyone rushing to the room. Claire soon found out that this was the work of two crewmen, Stumbo and his friend, who had played this cruel prank on her to punish her for bringing a German aboard their submarine. Furious and humiliated, Claire shouted at them in rage. Bryce and Odell arrived and sternly warned the men never to pull such stunts again, then left. But the warning had little effect. The two men laughed it off and later returned to retrieve the body from Claire's cabin, still joking about how frightened she had looked. As Stumbo began moving the corpse to an upper compartment, he suddenly heard a whisper, faint, close, and cold, telling him to turn around. At first, he assumed it was his partner trying to scare him, so he laughed it off and made a joke. But in truth, his companion was still busy in his own quarters. Then the whisper came again, this time from inside the corpse itself. Stumbo froze, his face drained of color. The eerie voice seemed to echo in his mind. In terror, he stumbled backward and fell hard onto the floor, shocking the others who witnessed it. Panicking, Stumbo rushed to tell the rest of the crew what had happened, insisting that the dead man had spoken to him. No one believed him. They laughed, teasingly asking in what language the corpse had spoken. Meanwhile, Claire was still deeply shaken and couldn't bring herself to stay alone in her room. She stepped out into the corridor, trying to calm down. That's when she noticed something lying outside Bryce's cabin, a diary. She picked it up and decided to return it to his room. Inside, she saw another book, the official naval captain's log, which every commanding officer was required to maintain. Curious, she opened it and began reading. But again, she heard that same soft whispering voice surrounding her. Looking closer at the logbook, she noticed something odd. Two different handwriting styles. Why would there be two, she wondered. Before she could think further, a locker nearby creaked open on its own. Inside was a photograph. Claire glanced at it briefly, then tried to shut the locker, but it suddenly swung open again, startling her. This time, she looked more closely at the photograph and froze. It was the picture of Captain Winter, the submarine's real commanding officer, someone Claire had never seen aboard. The horrifying truth hit her. Bryce was not the real captain. As she tried to process this, one of the crewmen, Cor, entered the cabin. Thinking quickly, Claire pretended to be frightened and said she'd come there only because she was too scared to sleep alone. But since this was the captain's cabin, Cor immediately ordered her to leave. Meanwhile, the crew once again picked up signals of an enemy ship nearby. After learning that enemy ships were nearby once again, Bryce ordered the submarine's engines to be shut off. Because of this, the submarine suddenly hit the ocean floor, causing a strong jolt. Claire became a little angry at this, but according to Bryce, the most important thing right now was to keep everyone alive. After that, Claire went back to her room, once again lost in thoughts about Winter. But then Bryce came there too. He had found out that Claire had gone into his quarters earlier. So, the first thing Claire did was apologize to him. And then she tried to find out whether there really was some kind of secret behind the submarine. Hearing this, Bryce understood that Claire wanted to know the truth about Winter. So, he told her that once, when they were in the Atlantic Ocean, they had suddenly discovered that a German ship was nearby. Winter had attacked that ship and completely destroyed it, killing many Germans. To celebrate the victory, Winter went to the corner of the submarine. But at that moment, a broken piece from the German ship hit their submarine, and due to the impact, Winter fell into the water. After reporting this incident, Bryce was made the new captain. Listening to all this, Claire was completely shocked. But suddenly, the alarm started blaring, definitely a sign of danger. At the same time, Bryce also began seeing a strange shadow in front of him. Frightened, he rushed out of Claire's room and joined the rest of his crew. Soon, Odell received word of another attack on the ship. This time, the enemy was using hooks-like weapons to damage their submarine. Because a large section was now damaged, water began seeping in. Seeing this, all the crew members in that area moved to safer sections, while Bryce ordered the submarine to move slightly forward to reach a safer location. However, they soon realized that their submarine had developed a leakage. Their oil was spilling out, which was allowing the enemy ship to trace them. Since there was no other option but to repair the submarine from outside, Odell went out with Cooper, Valley, and another crewmate toward the damaged section. As they were heading toward the rear side of the submarine, a large group of rayfish suddenly attacked them. Odell scared them away by firing a flare, and they all moved to the bottom section of the submarine. There, they split into pairs and went in different directions because they didn't know the exact location of the leak. Meanwhile, strange ghostly shadows had been appearing in the submarine for some time, and Bryce was deeply disturbed by them. He was currently writing about everything in his diary. Odell was with Cooper, who began talking to him about Captain Winter. He revealed that Winter's death wasn't an accident. That day, after destroying the German ship, Winter had been in a very cheerful mood. But many German soldiers had fallen into the water, and Winter could have saved them if he wanted to. Bryce and Cooper had wanted to rescue them, but Winter refused to listen, and while trying to stop them, he himself fell into the sea. Meanwhile, Cooper started climbing the ladder inside the submarine. Suddenly, he saw a shadow above him. Startled, he slipped, fell down, and a heavy metal hammer hit his face, killing him instantly. Odell was horrified. The other team managed to locate the leakage point and repaired it. But when they came back to Odell and saw Cooper's dead body, they were terrified. They too noticed a shadow nearby and, frightened, immediately returned inside the submarine. The rest of the crew grew angry at them for not bringing Cooper's body back. At that moment, Claire arrived and gave them blankets, since they were shivering from the cold. But the men were so frustrated and scared that they told her to stay away from them. Having seen ghostly shadows themselves, they told everyone about it. Hearing this, Claire began to suspect that the ghostly figure was actually Captain Winter's spirit. But Bryce completely refused to believe any such thing and even scolded Claire for talking like that. For now, the crew decided that they would head toward the nearest port because their submarine had sustained serious damage. But when the crew was trying to take the submarine closer to the port, suddenly, the steering wheel jammed on its own. The crew member controlling it was completely shocked, and now the submarine had started moving by itself toward the same location where, in the past, Winter had destroyed the German ship. Everyone tried forcing the wheel to turn, but it broke, and now the submarine was moving entirely on its own. Because of this terrifying situation, the entire crew grew deeply frightened and started desperately trying to think of a solution. But even after a long discussion, no one could come up with anything. Some among them truly began to believe that this was the work of Winter's ghost, while others thought it was just a technical failure. Then, after suddenly checking the hydrogen meter readings, Stumbo quietly went to Bryce and Core and told them that the hydrogen level inside their submarine had reached 12, while it usually stayed at just 3. This was an extremely alarming situation, because if they tried to surface directly, the sudden pressure change would cause their bodies to explode. No one else knew about this, but Odell, Kingsley, and Claire had overheard the conversation between Stumbo and Bryce. Acting quickly, Stumbo and his team sealed off the submarine's main area and, along with one partner, went to release the built-up hydrogen. During the process, he managed to set up the entire system properly. Meanwhile, Bryce, Core, Kingsley, Odell, and a few others moved toward the safe area. However, since the rest of the crew didn't know about the hydrogen release, one of them unknowingly opened the sealed door, which caused a massive explosion and fire to erupt through the entire section. Those in the safe zone had no idea what had just happened. But when Bryce tried to contact the external team and got no response, he went out to check, only to discover that everyone out there had already been burned to death. Seeing this horrifying sight, Core, Odell, and Bryce were all completely shattered. Bryce stayed back in the safe area while the others went to see the horrifying scene for themselves. But after only a short while, they returned, terrified and devastated. However, Core didn't come back immediately. He was standing in front of a mirror, feeling something strange about his reflection. Suddenly, in that reflection, he saw Winter. The sight scared him so badly that he ran back to Bryce, shouting that Winter was there, and immediately exited the submarine through the underwater escape hatch. But because he hadn't adjusted his body's pressure before going out, the sudden change in pressure caused his body to explode the moment he got outside. The rest of the crew inside the submarine realized what had happened, and fear spread among them. Still, knowing they had to survive at any cost, they went back into the pressure room to reduce the internal pressure. Suddenly, they felt someone's presence behind a curtain, but when Bryce pulled it aside, the ghostly shadow of Winter disappeared instantly. Bryce was terrified, but still, he joined the others and moved toward the section where they were managing the submarine's pressure. Along the way, they found Stumbo. He had somehow survived, though he was trembling from the cold and speaking incoherently, almost like a madman. Seeing this, Claire slapped him to bring him back to his senses and ordered him to focus on stabilizing the submarine's pressure. Stumbo then began working on it again. Meanwhile, Bryce seemed completely lost in his own thoughts, and no one could figure out what he was really planning. Claire, on the other hand, wanted to know more about Winter, so she went back to Bryce's cabin and began reading through Winter's notes. And that's when she discovered the shocking truth, that the ship Bryce had seen at the time of Winter's death wasn't actually a German ship at all. but a British one. Bryce had mistakenly ordered an attack on it. And as soon as Winter found out about this, Winter had actually tried to save the people who had fallen into the water. But since doing so could have cost Bryce his job and possibly sent him to prison, he and Core decided to kill Winter. After that, Bryce made himself the new captain. When Claire discovered this horrifying truth, she was completely shocked and terrified. But then, she suddenly saw Winter lying on the captain's bed, as if asleep. Alarmed, she ran and told Odell about it. Hearing this, Odell too was deeply shaken, but he didn't want to waste time discussing it, because their main goal right now was to find a way out and survive. Meanwhile, Stumbo had successfully stabilized the internal pressure, which meant they could now bring the submarine back to the surface. But since none of the automatic controls were working, they tied a rope around the main lever that lifted the submarine upward and began pulling it with all their strength. After a long and exhausting effort, they finally succeeded. The submarine began rising and reached the surface of the water. However, they still didn't know how to signal for help or contact any nearby ship. So Stumbo tinkered with the communication system and, luckily, managed to get it working again. As fortune would have it, there was indeed a ship nearby. They began contacting it and calling for rescue, but just then, Bryce appeared and ordered them not to do it. According to him, that was a German ship, though in reality, it wasn't. Bryce already knew that Claire and Odell had learned the truth about his past crimes. He didn't want them to escape and expose him. When Odell tried to stop him, Bryce shot him, then turned and destroyed the entire communication system with gunfire. At that very moment, Claire noticed a control switch that could open the submarine's entrance hatch. She used it and climbed out. Once on the surface, she began waving her hands desperately, trying to signal the ship nearby. But the ship couldn't see her yet. Suddenly, Bryce also climbed up after her. At first, he intended to kill Claire, but as all the events of the past flashed before him, he broke down completely. He finally realized that just to keep power and control in his hands, he had committed terrible acts and caused the deaths of many innocent people. Overcome with guilt and regret, Bryce pointed the gun at himself and shot. His body fell into the sea. By then, Odell had regained consciousness. He grabbed a shotgun and a flare, climbed up, and fired the flare toward the ship. And finally, the ship noticed them. The rescue team from the ship reached and saved both of them. That ship turned out to be a British vessel. The next day, while talking to Odell aboard it, Claire noticed something strange. Their submarine was now slowly sinking back into the depth of the ocean, all on its own. Watching this, she understood everything. The Captain Winter had loved his submarine and his honor more than anything else. Even after death, he hadn't abandoned it. He had taken the submarine with him, forever, into the deep sea. So, how did you like the story? Tell me in the comments. I really want to know what moment hit you the most. And if you enjoyed it, press that like button right now. Let's cross 1,000 likes together. Don't forget to subscribe, because more thrilling stories are coming your way soon.